Hello, fellow multimedia fans, and welcome to another episode of Jim's Multimedia Musings. I'm happy to report I've recovered somewhat from my long-winded rant against the bubble. Even though that video just dropped recently, I recorded that over a month ago, and truth be told, it left me so disillusioned with Netflix movies that I hadn't watched a single one up until a couple of days ago. That's how much that movie pissed me off. Well, I'm over it. And I gotta say, I'm really excited because later today, I'll be checking out the newest movie in theaters, Top Gun Maverick, for which I have to say I am well and truly hyped. Which is not something I could always say, because I gotta say that while I had always planned to see this movie, it wasn't exactly something I was going to rush out to see on the first weekend. Well, the hype train for this movie has been growing. The reviews have been stellar. And there's a lot of people who've been saying good things about it. And, well, what can I say? My interest has been piqued. That said, okay, before I head into the movie and, most likely to enjoy myself, I have to take pause and take some exception to some of the things that have been accompanying those glowing movie reviews. Okay, there's basically two main assertions among all of the reviewers and pundits praising this movie. Number one, it's that Tom Cruise is the last true movie star. And number two, it's that Top Gun Maverick is somehow saving cinema. Okay, number one, I will not dispute at all, because the truth of the matter is that Tom Cruise, more than any of his peers or contemporaries or any of the movie stars that I grew up with, has proven to be hands down the most enduring. Okay, he's been steadily working, I think, since the very early 80s, and he has had a hit. He's had a hit in at least once in the last the last 4 decades. The guy is he's a machine. And even though he doesn't have a 100% track record, yeah, sure, he's had some flops. The Mummy. The Mummy. Anyway, he goes out there, and that's the thing. That's another thing. Tom Cruise is not someone who rests on his laurels either. Even though he knows his bread and butter is basically the Mission Impossible movies, he's always pushing himself and trying new things. Literally at risk of life and limb. In that department, he's arguably second only to Jackie Chan. And this pays off. Because unlike people like Will Smith, unlike a lot of other actors of his era, he hasn't resorted to movies on streaming. He doesn't have a Netflix movie or an Apple Plus movie. He doesn't have a series. He has ever and only and always kept his stuff in theaters. In fact, he made a big point about that during the Cannes Film Festival. When they asked him, was this ever going to go to streaming? And he was like, no, never. And yes, so for that, I wholeheartedly agree with number one. Tom Cruise is the last remaining movie star. Okay, number two, the assertion is that he's saving cinema. Okay, this is kind of humorous because it feels like yet another anti-Marvel dig. Okay, it's not explicit, although sometimes it is. In some of the articles it is. And I don't really feel like defending Marvel. I'm sure they have enough apologists to do that for them. But I will say this to all of these people looking back on the era of movie stars through rose-colored lenses. Look, I'm a Gen Xer. I'm not that old, not that young either. I grew up with movies principally in the 80s, 90s, and noughties. And I gotta tell you, the age of star-driven cinema was not a golden age. Sure, we got some pretty sweet movies, but we got some real stinkers too. Okay. We got a bunch of real stinkers with your name above the title stars. You got people who commanded ridiculously high salaries. We had 8-figure people. And we had movies that were greenlit solely because so-and-so, Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, was in it. And not because the movie was any good. This era was the one that yielded yielded some pretty bad films Like, what was it? Meet Joe Black, Beverly Hills Cop 3, Jingle All the Way. Okay, we got some we got some really really nasty stuff and this from this period of time. And it was because back then, 80s, 90s, early 90s, the Hollywood suits couldn't think of anything better when coming up with movies than to slap, someone's famous name on the poster. It was all about personalities. It was all about who they put in the movie, not what they put in the movie. Sure, there was quality content. Sure, there were movies that had great stories. But they always took a back seat to the actors who were in the movies. You had movies like what? You had star-driven series like the Lethal Weapon movies, which were basically the same movie trotted out over and over again. I mean, Lethal Weapons 3 and 4 were just wow. Just so tired and old. You had people like Steven Seagal playing the same guy over and over and over again. Same with Jean-Claude Van Damme. When IP-based movies like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and finally Marvel came to the fore, they shoved all that crap to the dustbin of history where it belongs. Okay? Let's be clear on that. They didn't ruin cinema. They opened it up by bringing back the emphasis on story. The 23 film Infinity Saga would not have worked if it did not have a cohesive story running through it, plot holes and all, but whatever. The point is, movies like this, movies like the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, even the Harry Potter series, they brought back the emphasis on story. Okay, so they didn't kill cinema. Granted, they picked up a bit of a formula along the way. Okay, I suppose that's a natural pitfall. But they opened the market up. And not just that, they forced the people who used to make star-driven movies to up their game. Okay, so Tom Cruise, he stayed relevant. He stayed relevant all these years thanks to the Mission Impossible movies. And, well, he upped his game in terms of the stunts he does. I mean, not necessarily, he didn't necessarily make the most profound movies, but I mean, the stuff he put out has remained consistent and has remained consistently good all this time. I mean, you know that on this very channel, in one of my earlier episodes, I reviewed Edge of Tomorrow, aka Live, Die, Repeat. It's one of my favorite movies to watch during the pandemic. Because, it is. And a lot of these movies, a lot of these stars of the past had to adapt. They had to star in movies that had compelling stories. Well, Will Smith eventually joined the comic book squad when he starred in Suicide Squad. But here's another thing. Here's another reason why I disagree with the assessment that Tom Cruise is saving cinema. Okay. There's room in this marketplace for all of these movies. Marvel movies, Tom Cruise's movie, The Lost City, which by the way is a bigger breakthrough as far as I'm concerned than a lot of other movies, and arguably the biggest breakthrough movie of the year, Everything Everywhere All at Once. These are movies that can all share the marketplace together. I mean, granted, back in the end of 2021, it was all about Spider-Man. I mean, the movie was number one for like 6 weeks or something and basically made all the money. But here's the thing. It slowly but surely helped generate confidence in going back to movies again. Same with the Marvel movies. Same with Sandra Bullock's movie. All of these movies can coexist, and it's a good thing that they do. It's a good thing that we're not going back to the days of star-driven movies. Has anyone ever heard of a 20 or 30-something actor nowadays commanding an 8-figure salary? No? That's because there hardly are any, if there are any at all. And that's a good thing. That's what a lot of these people, looking back with nostalgia, with all this nostalgia on the star-driven era are forgetting. That this was also the era of massive egos, massive salaries. I forgot to mention this. Do you know what else the star-driven era gave us? It gave us Kevin Costner's stinkers like Waterworld and The Postman. See, that's what happens when movies are all about the stars. You get bloated budgets. You get people who are just paid way too much. So okay, it's going on longer than it should. But bottom line, I am definitely going to see Top Gun Maverick, and I am almost sure that I'm going to have a great time. But I am not going to take this movie and say, take that, Marvel, take that IP-based cinema. Your days are numbered. No, they're not numbered, and I'm glad they're not. Because, let's get this clear, there is more than enough room in theaters for movies like Top Gun, for movies like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, for movies like Everything Everywhere All at Once, and for movies like The Lost City and Downton Abbey. There's plenty of space, especially now the theaters are opening up, especially now that the pandemic is on the wane. I mean, let's be happy that there are all these movies in theaters, and not yearn for a period that people mistakenly seem to think was some kind of golden age, because damn, it was not. I can tell you that. Right? In fact, the only thing that doesn't belong in the whole conversation about the rejuvenation of movie theaters is streaming. But that's for another post. All right? And thanks for watching. Okay, if you just got here to this channel, I'd like to ask that you give me a like and a subscribe and hit that notification bell.